Nick Schuyler was sitting on the overturned hull of a boat in the Gulf of Mexico when the Coast Guard finally saw him. His body was shaking so badly that he could barely move. His skin was pale from cold water and sun, and his hands were locked around whatever part of the boat still rose above the waves. Around him there was open water in every direction. The three men who had left shore with him were gone. The trip had started before sunrise on February 28, 2009, at the Seminole Boat Ramp near Clearwater Pass, Florida. Schuyler was 24, a former University of South Florida football player who worked as a personal trainer. With him were three friends: Marquis Cooper, 26, a linebacker who had played in the NFL; Corey Smith, 29, a defensive end with NFL experience; and Will Bleakley, 25, Schuyler's best friend since sixth grade and another former USF player. Cooper owned the boat, a 21-foot Everglades center console with a powerful outboard motor. The plan was simple. They would run far offshore, fish for amberjack, and come home that evening. The weather near shore looked manageable when they left, but the Gulf could change faster than men on a small boat could outrun it. They headed roughly 50 miles out into the water, farther from the coast than most casual fishing trips ever went. For hours, the day stayed ordinary enough to feel safe. They fished, talked, and moved around the boat while the sea rose around them. Schuyler later said he became seasick and put on warmer clothing, including a sweatshirt and pants. The men had food, drinks, fishing gear, and life jackets aboard. What they did not have was much margin for error. Not that far offshore, with a front moving in and daylight already starting to run out. Around 5:30 that evening, they tried to leave. The anchor was stuck. It would not come free when they pulled on it, and the men began trying to force it loose. According to the official investigation, the anchor line was tied to the port side of the transom near the back of the boat as part of the attempt to break the anchor free. Then the boat was throttled forward. That mistake changed everything. With the anchor line tight and attached low at the stern, the force of the engine pulled the back of the boat downward instead of freeing the anchor. Water rushed over the transom. The stern dipped. In seconds, the boat filled and rolled. The men were thrown into rough Gulf water as the boat capsized. The shock was immediate. The sun was going down. The water was cold enough to drain body heat hour after hour. The boat was upside down, but it still floated. That hull became the only thing between the men and the open Gulf. At first, they worked to survive together. They recovered flotation devices. They tried to get on top of the hull, but the boat was partly submerged, and waves kept washing over it. Night closed over them. 6-foot seas rose and fell around the hull. The men were soaked, exhausted, and being pulled between panic and discipline. They were strong athletes, but strength meant less as the hours passed. Cold water did not care who had played football, who had trained harder, or who could lift more weight in a gym. It took heat from the body steadily, and the Gulf kept moving. They clung to the hull through the first night. Schuyler later said they prayed, talked, and tried to encourage one another. They were waiting for rescue, but no rescue came that night. Their families expected them home. Searchers did not yet know exactly where to look. The boat had gone over far offshore, and the Gulf was wide enough to hide a capsized hull from aircraft and ships passing miles away. By early morning on March 1st, the cold was doing visible damage. Cooper became weak and unresponsive. Around 5:30 that morning, he separated from the boat. Smith followed about an hour later. The exact moments belonged to Schuyler's memory and the official reports built from what he could tell investigators after rescue. What mattered was that 2 of the 4 were gone before the second day had fully begun. Schuyler and Bleakley remained. Bleakley was not just another friend on the boat. He had known Schuyler since they were boys. They had grown up together, played football together, and stayed close into adulthood. Now they were alone on a capsized boat, surrounded by water, with no way to know whether a helicopter would appear or whether the Gulf would take them too. Sunday passed slowly. The sun rose, burned, and dropped again. Their skin was exposed to salt and air. Their bodies were wet for hour after hour. They had no shelter, no drinking water, and no way to signal beyond the small shape of the boat itself. Schuyler later described bleakly trying to hold on, then weakening as the second night approached. The Coast Guard and other searchers were now looking across a massive area. Families waited on land while news spread that 2 NFL players and 2 former USF football players were missing in the Gulf. Hope was still alive because no wreckage had proven the worst, but every hour made the search harder. The boat was small, the water was rough, the men had already been exposed too long. During the second night, Bleakley's condition worsened. Schuyler later said his best friend became unresponsive. He tried to help him and perform CPR, but there was almost nothing left to work with. Less than 6 hours before Schuyler was found, Bleakley separated from the boat. Schuyler was the only one still clinging to it. By then, he was near the limit of human endurance. His body temperature had dropped dangerously low. He was dehydrated, sunburned, bruised, and trapped between waking and collapse. He had seen Cooper and Smith disappear. He had watched Bleakley, the friend he had known since childhood, fade in front of him. Still, he held on. On March 2nd, the Coast Guard cutter Tornado found the overturned boat about 70 miles west of Clearwater. From the cutter, crews saw Schuyler on the hull in a yellow jacket and an orange life vest. He was alive, but barely. A helicopter lowered a rescue basket, and he was lifted away from the boat that had kept him above water for nearly 2 days. At the hospital, the scale of his survival became clearer. His body temperature was reported at 88.8 degrees. He was suffering from hypothermia and exposure. Officials later said he had been within hours of dying. He survived roughly 46 hours in and around cold Gulf water after the boat capsized. The search for Cooper, Smith, and Bleakley continued, but their bodies were not recovered. The Coast Guard eventually suspended the search. Their families were left without the certainty that comes from bringing someone home. The accident investigation later pointed to improper anchoring, carelessness, and operator inexperience as factors. Cooper had boating experience, but investigators found no formal boating education, and the wrong decision with the anchor line had turned a stuck anchor into a capsizing. Schuyler's survival did not end the story cleanly. He came home as the only man who could explain what had happened, and that became its own burden. He faced questions, grief, and survivor's guilt. He had to describe the final hours of men whose families were mourning them without bodies to bury. He later told the story publicly and co-wrote Not Without Hope, not as a clean rescue tale, but as an account of friendship, error, endurance, and loss. The fishing trip off Clearwater lasted less than a day before it became a fight for life. 4 men left the ramp together before dawn. They reached open water, lost an anchor, made one deadly attempt to free it, and were thrown into a gulf that turned their strength against them. Marquis Cooper, Corey Smith, and Will Bleakley were gone before rescue arrived. Nick Schuyler survived because he stayed with the hull through cold, fear, exhaustion, and the final hours when he had no one left beside him. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.